In 1998, the Titanic star started a wildlife foundation. Most people didn't notice. 2 decades later, that move placed him at the center of global climate action, quietly funding science, pushing policy, and investing in the future. This is the part of his life that doesn't roll during the credits. Back in 1998, Leonardo DiCaprio wasn't yet the climate guy. He was the 24-year-old actor who'd just become a global name thanks to Titanic. But that same year, he started the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation, not for PR, but because the issues already mattered to him. The foundation started small, with a focus on preserving ecosystems and species under threat, especially those disappearing without much notice. Over the next 2 decades, it turned into something much bigger. The foundation didn't just toss money at problems, it targeted very specific areas: climate change, wildlife protection, ocean conservation, and indigenous rights. And the money was real. By the time LDF wrapped its standalone operations and merged with other groups, it had issued over $100 million in grants. That included funding for anti-poaching efforts in Africa, rainforest protection programs in South America, and research into ocean acidification. DiCaprio didn't just attach his name to a cause, he put serious financial support behind it. Groups like Rewild, which he co-founded with Global Wildlife Conservation, got a major boost from that kind of backing. Rewild now plays a big role in protecting endangered species and restoring natural habitats. And having DiCaprio in the mix brings attention and money that wouldn't otherwise be there. He's also worked closely with Look to the Stars and has made appearances at events like the UN Climate Summit, but always as someone who's been in this game for years, not just when it became trendy. What makes his philanthropic path stand out is that it's not built around personal branding, it's structured, legal, and funded in ways that are easy to track. He has also been involved in documentaries like Before the Flood, not as an actor but as a producer, helping push climate education into the mainstream. That blend of celebrity and sustained effort over time is rare. But DiCaprio's commitment didn't stop at donations. He took active roles in organizations to further his mission. When Leonardo DiCaprio talks about climate change, it's not a line written by someone else. He's not reading a script, he's been living this cause for decades. Back in 2014, the United Nations named him a messenger of peace, asking him to focus specifically on climate change. That title isn't just symbolic, it means speaking at major UN events, attending climate summits, and meeting with world leaders. DiCaprio took it seriously. One of his speeches at the UN General Assembly went viral, not because of who he is as an actor, but because of how clearly he called out the urgency of the crisis. But he didn't stop at speeches. DiCaprio has joined the boards of several organizations that are hands-on with conservation work, including the Natural Resources Defense Council and the International Fund for Animal Welfare. These aren't light duties. Board members shape direction, strategy, and funding priorities. Being involved at that level shows he's willing to work behind the scenes, not just pose for the camera or write a check. It's not always flashy, but that's where some of the most important decisions are made. Over the years, his environmental work has been recognized by groups that usually hand awards to politicians or lifelong humanitarians. He received the Clinton Global Citizen Award, which honors people who show leadership in solving global problems. He also picked up the Crystal Award at the World Economic Forum in Davos, which tends to go to artists or cultural figures making real social impact. Again, this isn't for acting, it's for environmental work. That distinction matters. What stands out is how consistent he has been. Unlike some celebrities who dip into activism when it's trendy, DiCaprio has kept at it for over 20 years. Whether it's advocating for marine life protection or working on climate change policy through his foundation, his efforts have been part of a much larger push. And when you stack that up next to his Hollywood career, it's clear the environment isn't a side project, it's a second career. Beyond organizational roles, DiCaprio has also invested in sustainable businesses to promote environmental solutions. Leonardo DiCaprio isn't just writing checks to charities or standing behind a podium at climate events, he's also putting money into businesses trying to change how people eat, shop, and consume. One of his better-known moves was getting behind Beyond Meat early on, The company was already gaining traction for its plant-based burger that looked and tasted like the real thing, and DiCaprio's involvement added credibility, especially with younger consumers. Around the same time, he also invested in Califia Farms, a company that makes plant-based milk alternatives. It wasn't a random endorsement. These were companies trying to cut into industries that put a massive strain on land and water. He's taken it further with lab-grown meat, which still feels futuristic to most people. But DiCaprio saw potential in startups like Aleph Farms and Moza Meat. These companies are trying to produce real meat without slaughtering animals or contributing to deforestation and methane emissions, two major problems tied to industrial livestock farming. The science is still evolving, but DiCaprio's name brings visibility to something most people wouldn't otherwise hear about unless they're following food tech news. Outside of food, he's also invested in Loci, a vegan sneaker brand based in London. Their shoes look like typical fashion sneakers, but they're made from recycled ocean plastics and don't use any animal products. It's not something you'd see plastered across a billboard, but that low-key, purpose-driven model is what drew DiCaprio in. Same with ID Genève, a Swiss watch company using recycled steel and renewable energy in their production process. Watches don't scream ego-conscious, but here, too, he's betting on small changes in design and sourcing to chip away at the norm. These investments aren't about chasing quick profits. If they were, he'd be pouring money into tech or real estate like everyone else. Instead, DiCaprio's portfolio lines up with the causes he's supported for over 2 decades. That doesn't mean every venture will succeed. Startups are not risky by nature, but it shows he's trying to make the commercial world part of the solution, not the problem. DiCaprio's influence extends to media, where he uses storytelling to raise awareness about environmental issues. Leonardo DiCaprio has been using film not just to entertain but to inform. Through his production company, Appian Way Productions, he's put out several documentaries that tackle environmental issues head-on. He's using storytelling to make things like rising sea levels or deforestation feel immediate and personal. One of the better-known examples is Before the Flood, a 2016 documentary produced in partnership with National Geographic. In it, DiCaprio travels around the world, from the melting glaciers of the Arctic to polluted cities in China, trying to make sense of the climate crisis. The film isn't just packed with facts, it connects those facts to real lives, showing how people in different parts of the world are already being affected. What makes this approach different is that he doesn't just throw information at the audience, he talks to scientists, policymakers, and even religious leaders like Pope Francis. The idea is to bring multiple perspectives into the conversation and build a story that anyone, regardless of their background, can connect with. The result? Millions of views, classroom screenings, and social media conversations sparked by a film that doesn't feel preachy, just honest. Appian Way has backed other environmentally focused films too, including Cowspiracy and Sea of Shadows. These aren't blockbuster movies, but they've built strong followings by tapping into real concerns about food systems, species extinction, and illegal wildlife trafficking. Instead of pushing a political line, these films ask people to look closer at how everyday choices and global systems are linked. What's also worth noting is that DiCaprio doesn't just lend his name to these projects, he gets involved. He appears on camera, narrates, and uses his own experiences to guide the story. That kind of personal involvement changes how the message lands. When someone like DiCaprio, who could easily stay in the Hollywood spotlight, decides to spend time chasing footage in Borneo or speaking at climate conferences, it gives the topic a certain weight. These media projects don't promise easy answers. What they offer is awareness, delivered in a way that feels human, not corporate. And they've done more than just reach viewers. They've helped push climate change into pop culture, turning a topic that once felt remote into something urgent and close to home. While his public efforts are commendable, DiCaprio's personal lifestyle choices also reflect his commitment to the environment. Leonardo DiCaprio's commitment to sustainability isn't just something he talks about, it shows up in how he spends his money and lives his life, at least in some areas. One of the more unusual examples is Blackador Cay, a small island he bought off the coast of Belize. He didn't turn it into a playground for celebrities or influencers. Instead, he teamed up with developers, to build an eco-resort that runs on renewable energy and uses materials designed to have as little environmental impact as possible. The idea was to create something that blended luxury with environmental responsibility, where the buildings worked with the landscape rather than replacing it. Even in more traditional investments like real estate, he tends to favor properties that incorporate green features. His home in Los Angeles reportedly uses solar panels and other sustainable technologies. That kind of thing might sound minor, especially for someone with his level of wealth, but it's consistent with the message he's been putting out for years. That every system, including housing, has to be reconsidered in the context of climate. He has also been vocal about lowering personal carbon footprints. Unlike many celebrities who cruise around in luxury SUVs or sports cars, DiCaprio has been spotted for years driving a Toyota Prius and later a Fisker Karma, a hybrid electric sports car. Again, it's not flashy, it's deliberate. He's never pretended to be perfect, but he's made real efforts to reflect his views and his choices, even if only symbolically. That said, this part of his lifestyle does come with its contradictions. The island resort is still a luxury destination, and private islands don't scream sustainability. Even when built responsibly, the carbon cost of flying in guests and shipping supplies can't be ignored. Still, compared to how many celebrities approach wealth, often with extravagance and zero concern for impact, DiCaprio at least tries to build something that fits with his broader environmental stance. He isn't someone who preaches austerity. He's rich and he lives like it, but the decisions he makes tend to carry some thought about environmental cost. And that includes where he builds, how he travels, and what kinds of products he uses. Despite his efforts, DiCaprio has faced criticism regarding the environmental impact of his travel and lifestyle. Leonardo DiCaprio has spent over 2 decades using his platform to call attention to climate issues. But that doesn't mean he's immune to criticism. In fact, the higher his profile as an environmental advocate, the more scrutiny he attracts, especially when it comes to his own carbon footprint. One of the most common complaints aimed at DiCaprio is his use of private jets. Whether it's flying across continents to attend award shows or climate events, people notice, and it often sparks a predictable reaction. How can someone who warns the world about emissions still choose one of the most polluting forms of travel? In 2016, British tabloids ran with a story about DiCaprio flying from Cannes to New York and back within a short span just to accept a climate award. That story fueled the argument that he was talking the talk without walking it. Even outlets like The Guardian and Vox asked tough questions about whether his lifestyle matched his message. To some, it felt hypocritical. To others, it raised a more complicated point about what it takes to stay visible and effective in a media-driven world. DiCaprio hasn't ignored the criticism. While he hasn't directly addressed every incident, his broader response has been consistent. Individual behavior does matter, but focusing only on personal choices can distract from the bigger picture. In his speeches and interviews, he has often returned to the idea that real change comes from laws, investments, and industry-wide shifts, not just from cutting back on travel or switching to a metal straw. He's argued that shaming individuals can take attention away from the corporations and systems doing the most damage. He has also made moves to balance things out in ways that go beyond surface gestures. DiCaprio supports carbon offset programs and backs efforts to push for renewable energy and reforestation. He funds grassroots groups fighting deforestation in the Amazon and conservation projects that protect entire ecosystems. None of that erases the emissions from a private jet, but it does show an effort to contribute more than he consumes. The contradiction is there, but so is the effort to address it in a way that's bigger than just personal image. Looking ahead, DiCaprio continues to expand his philanthropic endeavors and environmental initiatives. Leonardo DiCaprio doesn't seem interested in slowing down when it comes to environmental work. He might be better known to the general public for his movies, but behind the scenes, he is still pushing forward in projects that line up with the things he has been talking about for over 20 years. Rewild, the conservation group he co-founded, is a big part of that. It's not just a logo or a side project, it's a hands-on partnership with scientists, researchers, and local conservation teams across the globe. Their work isn't abstract either. They're involved in projects like protecting the vaquita, one of the world's most endangered marine mammals, and restoring ecosystems in places like the Amazon and the Congo Basin. What sets Rewild apart is that it's not about quick wins. These are long-term efforts, often in politically complicated areas where progress isn't measured in Instagram likes, but in slow recovery and survival. DiCaprio's role isn't scientific, obviously, but his influence helps get funding and attention to issues that don't usually make headlines. When he tweets about a species most people have never heard of, conservation groups know the donations will spike. On the business side, he is still putting money into clean tech and energy startups. While he doesn't promote these the same way he supports nonprofit efforts, they're part of the bigger picture, betting on companies that could shift how energy is produced or used. He's reportedly backed ventures focused on sustainable battery storage and low-emission building materials. Again, it's not glamorous work, and most people wouldn't notice unless they were following trade publications. But it lacks with his pattern. Invest where the stakes are high, and returns, if they happen, could help reshape a system. DiCaprio's also been mentioned as part of upcoming film projects that aim to mix narrative with environmental messaging, much like Don't Look Up did. While not every movie has to be about climate, he has shown he's willing to use Hollywood as a tool when it fits the story and the moment. His future looks like more of the same, not because it's trendy, but because it's consistent with the way he's approached this work from the start. Steady, strategic, and with the long game in mind. Could Leonardo DiCaprio's model of combining celebrity influence with environmental activism inspire others to follow suit? Share your thoughts in the comments below.